The twin suns of Andrania cast their golden light across the crystalline spires of the Xalraga capital, their rays refracting through the orbital defense satellites that hung like deadly jewels in the planet's atmosphere. From his position on the observation deck of the Royal Citadel, Admiral Cale Draven watched the automated defense grid conduct its daily patrol, each satellite a testament to the technological supremacy that had kept the Xalraga Empire secure for 3 centuries. The Citadel itself was a marvel of engineering, its golden architecture rising from the planet's surface like a monument to divine ambition. Cascading waterfalls flowed down its sides, their waters charged with bioluminescent particles that created an ethereal glow in the perpetual twilight of the binary star system. The structure housed not only the royal chambers, but also the central command hub that coordinated the Empire's vast military network across 17 star systems. Cale adjusted his ceremonial uniform, the weight of his rank insignia pressing against his chest. As Supreme Admiral of the Void Fleet, he commanded respect from every corner of the galaxy. Yet today, he felt the familiar hollow ache of uncertainty. The photograph tucked inside his breast pocket seemed to burn against his heart, a reminder of the family he had lost to the last great war, and the reason he had dedicated his life to protecting this empire. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the crystal corridors, accompanied by the distinctive hum of the Royal Guard's energy shields. Queen Selthura was coming, and when she summoned the military council to an emergency session, it meant only one thing: war was approaching. The assembly hall materialized around them as the holographic walls shifted and expanded, creating an amphitheater that could accommodate the Empire's highest-ranking officers. Admiral Draven took his position at the Queen's right hand, noting the tension in the faces of his fellow commanders. General Vyros of the Ground Forces, Admiral Nexus of the Inner Rim, Fleet Commander, Zeta of Special Operations, all bore the same expression of barely contained anxiety. Queen Selthura herself was an imposing figure, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with the characteristic blue-tinted skin and silver hair of the Xalraga royal bloodline. Her eyes, like pools of liquid mercury, surveyed the assembled officers with an intensity that could freeze plasma. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "My loyal commanders," she began, her words echoing through the chamber's acoustically perfect design, "our intelligence networks have confirmed what we have long feared. The Durmanes, the savage alliance of the Durgan clans, has unified under the banner of Warlord Gresh. Their fleet, numbering in the thousands, advances toward our outer colonies as we speak." The holographic display at the center of the room flickered to life, showing the approaching enemy fleet as red dots against the star map. The sight was overwhelming more ships than the Xalraga had faced in any single engagement in their recorded history. "Our conventional forces," the Queen continued, "while advanced, are outnumbered 3-1. The Durgan fight with a savagery that our tactical algorithms cannot predict or counter. They do not fear death as we do, and their willingness to sacrifice entire fleets for minor tactical advantages has proven problematic in our preliminary engagements." Admiral Draven felt the weight of the Queen's gaze fall upon him. "Admiral Draven," she said, her voice dropping to a tone that somehow managed to be both intimate and threatening. "You have served this empire faithfully for 2 decades. Your strategic brilliance has been the shield that protected our people through countless conflicts. But now, I require something more than conventional warfare." The Queen stepped closer, her presence dominating the space around her. "I have studied the archives, Draven. There are legends scattered across the galaxy of warriors so fierce that a single soldier could turn the tide of entire wars. Civilizations that conquered not through numbers, but through an indomitable spirit that made their enemies tremble before the battle even began." She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering her ultimatum. "I am sending you on a mission, Admiral. You will find me an army. Not thousands of soldiers, not hundreds of ships, but something more valuable: warriors with the spirit to inspire our people and strike fear into the hearts of our enemies. You have 72 hours. The silence that followed was deafening. Admiral Draven felt the eyes of every officer in the room upon him, waiting for his response. The photograph in his pocket seemed to grow heavier. "And if I fail, Your Majesty?" he asked quietly. The Queen's mercury eyes reflected no warmth. "Then you will be executed for treason, and I will find someone else to save our empire." The weight of the mission settled on Kale's shoulders, like a lead cloak as he made his way through the Citadel's corridors toward the military hangar. 72 hours to find legendary warriors in a galaxy where most civilizations had been catalogued and conquered. The task seemed impossible, yet the alternative execution and the fall of the Empire was unthinkable. The hangar bay stretched out before him, filled with the sleek forms of the Royal Fleet's finest vessels. But for this mission, he would need speed and stealth over firepower. His choice was immediate: the Nightshade, a reconnaissance vessel designed for deep space exploration and covert operations. Its dark hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and its enhanced sensors could detect life signs from 3 star systems away. His crew was already assembled when he arrived at the ship. Lyra, his communications specialist, was a young Zalraga prodigy whose ability to decode alien languages had proven invaluable in first-contact situations. Her silver hair was braided with data cables that allowed her to interface directly with the ship's communication array. Gaia, the chief engineer, represented one of the Empire's allied species, the Zephyrians, whose natural affinity for technology made them invaluable in maintaining the complex systems that powered Zalraga vessels. Her translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that reflected her emotional state, currently showing the deep blue of concern mixed with anticipation. The third member of his team was perhaps the most mysterious. Known only as Shade, the operative belonged to the Empire's intelligence division, and their true identity remained classified even from Admiral Draven. Wrapped in a form-fitting suit that seemed to shift and flow, like liquid shadow, Shade's presence was both reassuring and unsettling. Admiral, Lyra's voice carried a note of barely controlled nervousness. "I've been monitoring quantum communications across the sector. There are scattered reports of ancient ruins on the Outer Rim planets, some containing references to warrior cultures that predate the formation of the Empire." Gaia's bioluminescent patterns shifted to a brighter green as she spoke. "The Nightshade's sensors have been calibrated to detect energy signatures consistent with preserved stasis technology. If these legendary warriors exist, they may still be in suspended animation." Shade remained silent, but their slight nod indicated agreement with the proposed course of action. Admiral Draven felt a spark of hope for the first time since receiving his orders. "Set course for the Outer Rim. If legends exist, we'll find them in the places where history goes to hide." The launch sequence engaged with a subtle vibration that ran through the ship's superstructure. As the Nightshade lifted away from the Citadel, Admiral Draven took one last look at the golden spires of his home. The photograph in his pocket seemed to whisper promises of redemption and warnings of failure in equal measure. The journey to the Outer Rim took 18 hours, during which time Lyra worked tirelessly to decode intercepted transmissions and piece together fragments of ancient mythology. The stories she uncovered spoke of humans, a species that had once dominated several sectors before mysteriously vanishing from galactic records. These humans were described as warriors of unparalleled ferocity and tactical brilliance, capable of adapting to any combat situation with a creativity that bordered on the supernatural. According to these fragments, Lyra reported, as they approached their destination, the humans established a forward military outpost on a planet called Gaon. The records suggest it was abandoned during what they called the Great Exodus, but the facility may still contain active preservation systems. Gaon appeared on their screens as a brown and green marble suspended against the starfield. Once it might have been a thriving world, but now it showed signs of centuries of abandonment. Atmospheric readings indicated it was still habitable, though much of the surface was covered in the kind of aggressive vegetation that reclaimed civilized worlds when left untended. The nightshade descended through the planet's atmosphere, its sensors probing for signs of artificial structures beneath the jungle canopy. What they found exceeded their expectations, a massive military complex buried under decades of overgrowth, its energy signature still faintly active. There, Gaia pointed to a section of the sensor display, where geometric shapes were barely visible through the vegetation. That's definitely artificial construction, and those energy readings suggest some kind of power source is still functioning. They landed in a clearing roughly a kilometer from the detected structures, the nightshade's adaptive camouflage immediately adjusting to match the surrounding foliage. The air outside was thick with humidity and the scent of flowering vines, but underneath lay the metallic tang of abandoned technology. The journey through the jungle was treacherous with paths that had been consumed by decades of unchecked growth. Ancient road markers, their text in an unfamiliar script, poked through the undergrowth like headstones in a forgotten cemetery. As they drew closer to the complex, the vegetation began to thin, as if even the aggressive jungle plants sensed something significant about this place. The structure that emerged from the greenery was breathtaking in its scale and design. Unlike the flowing organic architecture of the Zalraga, this human facility was built with harsh angles and practical efficiency. Massive walls of some unknown metal alloy rose from the ground, their surfaces scarred by time, but still structurally sound. Energy readings grew stronger as they approached what appeared to be the main entrance. It was there, as they examined the sealed doorway, that they heard the explosion. The sound came from deeper in the jungle, followed by the distinctive whine of energy weapons discharge. Shade immediately drew their sidearm and gestured for silence, while Gaia began scanning for life signs. Lyra's bioluminescent hair patterns shifted to the deep red of alarm. 3 humanoid life forms, Gaia whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of approaching combat. 1 injured, 2 pursuing. Admiral Draven made the decision without hesitation. We investigate. If there are survivors here, they might have information about the facility. They moved through the jungle with the precision of a military unit, following the sounds of conflict. What they found was a scene of desperation. A figure in a torn environmental suit crouched behind the twisted wreckage of what had once been a small spacecraft. 2 heavily armed beings in the distinctive armor of Durgan raiders advanced on the position, their weapons charged and ready. The injured figure was clearly not Durgan. Their build was wrong, more compact and agile. As Admiral Draven watched the survivor attempted to flee, only to stumble and fall. The Durgan raiders raised their weapons for the killing blow. Shade moved first, their forms seeming to blur as they crossed the distance between cover and combat. The first raider dropped without even seeing the attack. The second spun around, weapon ready, but Admiral Draven's plasma rifle took him center mass before he could fire. In the sudden silence that followed, they approached the survivor. The figure struggled to sit up, removing their damaged helmet, to reveal features that matched no known species in the galactic database. The survivor's hair was a rich brown color, their skin a warm tan, and their eyes held an intelligence that seemed both alien and familiar. "Thank you," the survivor said in accented but understandable galactic standard. "I didn't expect to find anyone else out here." Lyra stepped forward, her translation systems automatically adjusting to parse the unfamiliar accent. "Who are you? What species?" The survivor managed a weak smile. "I'm Dr. Mara Quinn, half human, half Centauri. I've been studying the ruins here for 6 months before those raiders found my camp." Admiral Draven felt his pulse quicken. "Human. You said half human." Dr. Quinn nodded, wincing as she tried to stand. "My mother was human. There aren't many of us left, but some of us survived the Exodus. We've been scattered across the rim worlds, keeping the old knowledge alive." "And the facility?" Admiral Draven gestured toward the complex they had discovered. Dr. Quinn's expression grew serious. "That's the heart of the Legion. It's where they kept the most sacred of human military traditions, the warrior's trial. Legend says It can awaken the spirit of the ancient warriors in those brave enough to attempt it. Gaia's patterns shifted to curious yellow. Awaken, you mean there are humans in stasis? Not exactly, Dr. Quinn struggled to explain. The trial isn't about waking sleeping warriors. It's about proving that the spirit of humanity, the thing that made them such formidable fighters, still exists. The facility was designed to test potential candidates, and if they proved worthy, to grant them access to the deepest military secrets and tactical knowledge of the human race. Admiral Draven felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. What kind of trial? Dr. Quinn looked at him with newfound interest. 3 tests representing the foundations of human military doctrine. Strength to prove the body can endure. Wisdom to prove the mind can adapt. And loyalty to prove the spirit will sacrifice for others. Only someone who passes all 3 can claim the title of Legion Commander. Shade spoke for the first time since the combat had ended, their voice electronically modulated, to hide any identifying characteristics. And what happens then? Then, Dr. Quinn said, her voice dropping to a whisper, the facility awakens the last warrior. The journey back to the complex took on new urgency as Dr. Quinn explained what she knew of the facility's systems. The heart of the Legion had been built not just as a military outpost, but as a repository of human martial culture. Every combat technique, every strategic innovation, every psychological warfare method developed by humanity had been stored within its quantum databases. But more than that, the facility housed something unique, a single human warrior preserved in the most advanced stasis system ever created. This warrior, known only as the Last Legion, was intended to be awakened only in humanity's darkest hour, when someone proved themselves worthy to lead in the ancient tradition. The trial chamber. Dr. Quinn explained as they entered the facility through a maintenance hatch she had discovered during her research, was designed to be activated by anyone, regardless of species. The builders believed that the qualities that made humans, great warriors, adaptability, courage, sacrifice could be found in any sentient being. The interior of the facility was a marvel of preserved technology. Emergency lighting flickered to life as they passed motion sensors, revealing corridors lined with metallic panels covered in human script. The air recycling system hummed to life efficiently, processing the external atmosphere to maintain a comfortable environment. Lyra's translation systems worked overtime as they made their way deeper into the complex. The writing describes this as a fortress of final hope, she reported. It speaks of preparations for a great exodus and the need to preserve their warrior spirit for future generations. They found the trial chamber at the heart of the facility, a vast circular room with 3 distinct sections, each marked with symbols that Dr. Quinn identified as representing the 3 trials. At the center of the room stood a raised platform surrounded by dormant, holographic projectors. The first trial. Dr. Quinn pointed to a section dominated by what appeared to be a combat arena. Tests physical prowess. Candidates must prove they can overcome superior force through skill and determination. The second section resembled a command center with multiple screens and control interfaces. Tactical acumen, Dr. Quinn continued. The ability to outthink an opponent to see patterns and possibilities that others miss. The third section was the most unusual, a simple chamber, with no apparent technology, just smooth walls and a single chair in the center. The test of sacrifice, Dr. Quinn said quietly. This is where many candidates fail. It requires giving up something valuable for the greater good. Admiral Draven studied each section carefully, feeling the weight of his mission pressing down upon him. 72 hours had become 48, and he was no closer to finding the army Queen Selthura demanded. If I were to attempt these trials, he said slowly, what exactly would happen? Dr. Quinn's expression grew grave. The facility would evaluate your performance across all 3 tests. If you succeed, it will activate the stasis chamber and awaken the last warrior. If you fail, she shrugged. The historical record suggests that failure results in the candidate being ejected from the facility and banned from returning. Gaia's patterns shifted to deep red. "Admiral, this seems extremely dangerous. We don't know what the tests actually involve, or what condition this preserved warrior might be in after centuries in stasis." But Admiral Draven was already moving toward the first trial. The photograph in his pocket seemed to pulse with warmth, reminding him of what he had lost and what he still fought to protect. "I didn't come this far to turn back now." The first trial activated the moment he stepped into the arena. Holographic projectors created a battlefield scenario around him, a recreation of an ancient human conflict on a world he didn't recognize. Enemy soldiers materialized from light and force fields, their weapons firing energy bolts that, while not lethal, carried enough kinetic force to cause real pain. The test was not simply about fighting, it was about adapting. Each time Admiral Draven found an effective tactic, the scenario changed. When he used cover effectively, the environment shifted to provide less protection. When he learned to anticipate enemy movements, their patterns became more complex. For 2 hours, he fought wave after wave of holographic opponents, each iteration teaching him something new about the nature of human warfare. It wasn't about superior technology or overwhelming force. It was about flexibility, about the ability to turn any situation to your advantage through creativity and determination. When the holograms finally faded, Admiral Draven found himself exhausted but exhilarated. A soft chime indicated that he had passed the first trial. The second trial was in many ways more challenging than the first. The command center came alive around him, presenting a complex tactical scenario involving multiple fleets and strategic objectives. But this wasn't just about military tactics. It was about understanding the psychology of warfare, the human element that no algorithm could fully predict. The scenario placed him in command of a desperate defense against overwhelming odds. Traditional tactics suggested retreat, but the human doctrine emphasized something else, turning disadvantages into advantages through unconventional thinking. Admiral Draven found himself implementing strategies that would have been considered reckless by Xalraga standards. Instead of preserving his forces, he divided them into smaller units that could strike unpredictably. Instead of defending static positions, he used mobility and misdirection to create the illusion of strength where there was weakness. The holographic enemy responded exactly as Xalraga forces would have, with confusion and hesitation, when faced with tactics that defied conventional logic. In the end, Admiral Draven achieved victory, not through superior firepower, but through making his opponents question their own assumptions. The third trial was the most difficult precisely because it appeared to be the simplest. The empty chamber offered no obvious challenge, no enemy to fight or puzzle to solve. Admiral Draven sat in the single chair and waited. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then gradually the walls began to display images, scenes from his own life, memories drawn from some deep scan of his neural patterns. He saw his graduation from the military academy, his first command, his marriage to the woman whose photograph he still carried. The images shifted to show his family, his wife and young daughter, lost in the last Great War when their transport was destroyed by raiders. He saw his own reaction to the news, the way the loss had driven him to dedicate his life to military service and the protection of others. Then, the chamber presented him with a choice. The walls showed two possible futures. In one, he returned to Queen Selthura, with the awakened warrior achieving victory, but at the cost of his own life in the final battle. In the other, he fled with his crew, abandoning his duty, but preserving his own existence. The test was not about choosing correctly. It was about understanding what true sacrifice meant. Admiral Draven had spent years believing that his dedication to duty was a form of sacrifice, but he realized now that he had been using duty as a shield against the pain of his loss. True sacrifice wasn't about dying for others. It was about living for them, about choosing to continue fighting even when the cost was unbearable. He thought of his crew waiting outside the chamber. He thought of the millions of Zalraga citizens depending on his success. He thought of his lost family and what they would have wanted him to do. "I choose to return," he said aloud, "whatever the cost." The chamber filled with light, and for a moment, Admiral Draven felt a presence that seemed to encompass the accumulated wisdom and courage of an entire civilization. Then the light faded, and he was alone. But he was no longer the same person who had entered the chamber. The central platform rose from the floor with a deep rumbling that seemed to emerge from the heart of the facility itself. What emerged was not what Admiral Draven had expected. Instead of an archaic stasis pod, a sleek, cylindrical chamber ascended into view, its surface covered in displays that showed complex biological readings. Dr. Quinn approached the chamber with obvious reverence. "The last warrior," she whispered. "I never thought I'd actually see it activated." The stasis system began its awakening sequence, flooding the chamber with nutrient mists and electrical stimulation designed to restore full biological function after centuries of suspended animation. Through the transparent aluminum viewing port, they could see a figure beginning to stir, humanoid, but with the distinctive compact build and muscular definition that characterized the human species. As the mists cleared, the figure's features became visible. The last warrior was a man perhaps 30 years old by human standards, with dark hair and eyes that held the particular intensity of someone who had seen extensive combat. Scars crossed his arms and torso, speaking of battles fought and survived. The chamber's seal broke with a soft hiss, and the warrior's eyes opened. They were brown, warm, and intelligent, but held depths that suggested experiences far beyond his apparent age. He sat up slowly, his movements careful and controlled as his body readjusted to consciousness. "Status report," he said, his voice rough from disuse, but carrying unmistakable authority. Dr. Quinn stepped forward. "Sir, you've been in stasis for approximately 300 years. The Great Exodus. Humanity has scattered across the rim worlds." The warrior Noah Brown, according to the identification that appeared on the chamber's displays, absorbed this information with remarkable composure. "And you are?" "Dr. Mara Quinn, xenoarchaeologist. This is Admiral Cale Draven of the Zalraga Empire and his crew." Noah's gaze fixed on Admiral Draven, and something passed between them, a recognition of shared purpose that transcended species barriers. "You completed the trials." "I did," Admiral Draven confirmed. "My empire faces destruction. We need the kind of warriors that legends claim humans once were." Noah stood, his movements fluid despite the long stasis. "One warrior won't win your war, Admiral." "Perhaps," Admiral Draven replied, thinking of Queen Selthura's words about legends and inspiration. "But maybe that's not the point." The journey back to Zalraga space took on a very different character, with Noah aboard the Nightshade. The human warrior proved to be everything the legends suggested: tactically brilliant, physically formidable, but most importantly possessed of an indefinable quality that seemed to inspire confidence in everyone around him. During the 18-hour return flight, Noah worked with Admiral Draven to understand the nature of the threat they faced. The Durgan military doctrine, such as it was, relied on overwhelming force and savage aggression. Their fleets attacked in massive formations, using numerical superiority to crush resistance through sheer brutality. "They fight like animals," Admiral Draven explained, pulling up tactical displays showing previous Durgan engagements. "No finesse, no strategy beyond charge and destroy. But their willingness to accept massive casualties has proven effective against our more conservative approach." Noah studied the data with the intensity of a scholar and the perspective of a warrior. "They're not animals," he said finally. "They're bullies, and bullies have a weakness that tactical computers can't exploit. Which is, they've never learned to fight when they're not winning." As they approached Zalraga, space long-range sensors detected the approaching Durgan fleet. Thousands of ships stretched across several light-years, an armada that dwarfed anything the Empire had faced before. But Noah seemed unconcerned by the overwhelming odds. "Your orbital defenses," he said, studying the specifications for the satellite network. "They're automated." "Completely," Admiral Draven confirmed. "AI-controlled targeting systems with response times measured in microseconds." "That's your first mistake," Noah said quietly. "Computers think in patterns. Humans think in possibilities." The Nightshade's arrival at the capital was met with a mixture of anticipation and skepticism. Queen Selthura had assembled the full military council to witness Admiral Draven's return, and the tension in the assembly chamber was palpable. When Admiral Draven entered with only Noah at his side, the murmur of voices grew to an agitated buzz. "Admiral Draven," Queen Selthura's voice cut through the noise like a plasma blade. "I sent you to find me an army. You return with a single human." The way she said the species name made it clear that she was familiar with humanity's reputation, though whether that familiarity bred respect or contempt was difficult to determine. "Your Majesty," Admiral Draven replied formally, "I have found what you requested. Not an army of soldiers, but something more valuable, a warrior who carries the spirit of an entire military tradition." General Vyros stepped forward, his expression skeptical. "Admiral, with respect, we face thousands of enemy vessels. How can one being regardless of species make a difference?" It was Noah who answered, his voice carrying easily through the chamber, despite its quiet tone. "General, how many of your soldiers have ever faced an enemy that fought differently than their training predicted?" The question seemed to catch Vyros off guard. "Our tactical algorithms account for all known combat variables." "All known variables," Noah agreed. "But what about unknown ones? What happens when your perfectly programmed fleets encounter tactics that don't exist in any database?" Queen Selthura leaned forward on her throne, her mercury eyes fixed on the human warrior. "You claim to possess such tactics." "I claim to possess something your enemies have never encountered," Noah replied. "The ability to adapt faster than they can respond." Admiral Draven felt the moment balanced on a knife's edge. The Queen could order their execution for bringing back what appeared to be insufficient force, or she could trust in the legends that had driven him to undertake this mission in the first place. "Prove it," Queen Selthura said simply. What followed was perhaps the most unusual military demonstration in Xalraga history. In the space of 6 hours, Noah worked with Admiral Draven to transform a single squadron of elite pilots into something the Empire had never seen before, a unit that fought with human tactical doctrine. The changes were subtle but profound. Instead of maintaining rigid formations, the pilots learned to flow like water, adapting their positions in real time based on battlefield conditions. Instead of following predetermined attack patterns, they learned to improvise to turn their opponent's strengths against them. Most importantly, they learned to think like humans, to see opportunities where algorithms saw only data points, to exploit weaknesses that emerged from the enemy's own assumptions about how civilized beings ought to fight. The transformation was remarkable to witness. Pilots who had been competent but predictable became unpredictable, and therefore dangerous. The squadron's performance in simulation exercises improved by orders of magnitude, not because their technology had changed, but because their thinking had evolved. "Impressive," Queen Selthura admitted as she reviewed the test results. "But will it be enough against thousands of enemy ships?" Noah's response was to request access to the orbital defense network. "Your satellites are powerful," he told the assembled commanders, "but they're also predictable. Give me control of just 1% of the network and I'll show you how a small force can defeat a large one." The Queen's agreement came with obvious reluctance, but the approaching Durgan fleet left little time for lengthy deliberations. Within hours, Noah had integrated himself into the Empire's defense grid, his human tactical insights merging with Xalraga technology to create something entirely new. The Durgan fleet arrived expecting to face the same methodical, predictable resistance they had encountered in previous battles. Instead, they found chaos. The modified defense satellites didn't simply target incoming ships, they created patterns of destruction that forced the enemy fleet to respond in specific ways. When the Durgan ships moved to avoid one trap, they fell into another. When they adapted to one tactic, the defenses had already shifted to something completely different. But the true brilliance of Noah's strategy wasn't in the tactical maneuvers, it was in the psychological warfare. The Durgan had built their entire military culture around the assumption that numerical superiority guaranteed victory. When that assumption proved false, when their massive fleet found itself outmaneuvered by a fraction of its own size, the psychological impact was devastating. Confusion spread through the Durgan ranks like a virus. Ships began firing on their own allies, mistaking desperate evasive maneuvers for enemy action. Formations collapsed as individual captains abandoned coordinated tactics in favor of self-preservation. Within 6 hours of engagement, the largest invasion force in galactic history was in full retreat, not because they had been destroyed, but because they had been made to defeat themselves. In the aftermath, as reports flooded in of the enemy's withdrawal, Queen Selthura stood before her assembled commanders, with something approaching awe in her mercury eyes. One warrior, she said, her voice carrying a note of wonder that her subjects had never heard before. One human warrior and a single admiral who understood that true strength comes not from numbers, but from the courage to think differently. She turned to Noah, who stood at attention with the quiet dignity that seemed to characterize his species. "Human, you have saved our empire. Name your reward." Noah's response was immediate and unexpected. "I ask for no reward, Your Majesty, but I would like to request something for Admiral Draven." The Queen's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Speak." "Make him your supreme war commander," Noah said. "Not just of the fleet, but of all military forces. And give him the authority to train other officers in human tactical doctrine." Today's victory was just the beginning. Admiral Draven felt something shift in the chamber's atmosphere. Queen Selthura was considering the proposal seriously, her strategic mind already seeing the possibilities. "And you?" she asked Noah. "What role would you take in this new order?" Noah's smile held both warmth and steel. "I'll do what humans have always done, Your Majesty. I'll adapt." The ceremony that followed was unlike anything in Zalraga tradition. Queen Selthura formally established the Human-Zalraga Military Alliance with Admiral Draven as Supreme War Commander and Noah Brown as Chief Tactical Advisor. The orbital defense network was reorganized around the new human influence doctrine, and a training program was established to integrate adaptive tactics into the Empire's military education. But perhaps the most significant change was in the Empire's fundamental approach to warfare. The rigid algorithm-based strategies that had characterized Zalraga military doctrine for centuries were supplemented by something new, the human concept of creative adaptation. As the twin suns set over the capital city, Admiral Draven stood once again on the observation deck of the Royal Citadel. The photograph in his pocket no longer felt like a burden, but like a reminder of why some fights were worth fighting regardless of the odds. Noah joined him at the railing, looking out over the city they had saved. "Your queen was right about one thing," the human warrior said quietly. "What's that?" "Sometimes one person can inspire an entire civilization to become something greater than they ever thought possible." Admiral Draven nodded, understanding finally what the legends had really meant. The power of the human warrior tradition wasn't in their technology or their numbers. It was in their refusal to accept that any situation was hopeless, and their ability to inspire that same refusal in others. In the distance, the orbital defense satellites continued their patrol, but now they moved with a different rhythm, less predictable, more adaptive. Like the empire they protected, they had learned to think not just with the precision of machines, but with the creativity of living beings who refused to be defeated. The Durgan would return, Admiral Draven knew. Other threats would emerge. But the Zalraga Empire was no longer the same civilization that had faced extinction just days before. They had learned the most important lesson that humanity had to teach, that victory comes not from being stronger than your enemies, but from being more adaptable than they can anticipate. And in the depths of space, other legends waited to be awakened by those brave enough to seek them out.